filthy swines, get in here, sit down. We're going to read some more news. You might like it. We seem to be entering Space Race 2.0, but this time it seems to be private industry is leading the wave. And that's a good thing. That means these private companies can be hired, I assume, by multiple nations. So we're going into a globalist phase of space exploration. So what exactly is the medium to long-term plan for space exploration? How do people fit in a world up there where everything's a little bit lethal? There's no air, there's no gravity, there's no food or water. What's the big deal there? I read a lot of science fiction, so I have my own ideas, but this article on CNN, two billionaires have very different and equally wild visions of a future in space. Is either possible? This article written by Jackie Wattles? That's a bit too small for me to read, love. I'm sorry. I'm going to say Jackie Wattles. If that's not your name, then I apologize. The cosmos has long been a canvas for creatives who imagine a future where people live among the stars. Now, humanity stands at a pivotal junction as the laborious, expensive, and high-stakes process of attempting to convert such grand visions into reality is actually underway. In the Western world, perhaps no one has more influence over how this future may be realized than Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, two of the world's richest men, both of whom own commercial space companies. They have a combined net worth that tops $630 billion, a sum that is growing to rival the amount of money NASA has been allocated over its entire 66-year history. Musk and Bezos have different ideas of what humans' future in space should look like, and their visions are not mutually exclusive, but each presents its own challenges, technically, financially, politically, and ethically. Musk has had perhaps the largest impact of any one person on space exploration in recent years, from both a cultural and technological standpoint, and he has long made known his singular focus on Mars, envisioning a day in which the red planet hosts a sprawling settlement of people. Meanwhile, Bezos, whose influence in the space industry has been somewhat tempered by his rocket company's slower pace, has kept his focus a bit closer to home. He's touted a vision of moving heavy industry and polluting industry off Earth, perhaps into spinning spaceborne laboratories where colonies of humans live and work full-time. In Bezos' imagined future, Earth is reserved for living and vacationing, perhaps preserved indefinitely as a national park. It's a crazy time to be alive. It's almost like somebody wrote this as a script, said Phil Metzger, a planetary physicist at the University of Central Florida. But, he added, living in space could be ethically good for our civilization. I think if we do it right, we could create a really bright future, said this dude Phil Metzger. Creating in-space settlements, however, is not a moral imperative, argues Alice Gorman, a space archaeologist and associate professor at Australia's Flinders University. And the stories Musk and Bezos tell about our future may ring differently to people across different socio-economic classes. I would say there are probably more people concerned by the impacts of climate change on Earth right now than are looking forward to a future in space, Gorman added. Musk and Bezos have billed their extraterrestrial pursuits as philanthropic, saying that off-Earth colonies are a form of life insurance that will guarantee humanity's survival if a natural or human-made catastrophe leaves our home planet uninhabitable. But there are significant differences between their ideas of cosmic habitation. Since founding SpaceX in 2002, Musk has said the company's guiding mission is to establish a self-sustaining city on Mars. That vision includes sending convoys of robots and then people to live within enclosed habitats, perhaps in Mars's Arcadia region. There, water to sustain such a colony may be trapped less than a foot beneath the dusty red surface. Eventually, Musk has said he hopes to put Mars through a process called terraforming, in which humans make the red planet more Earth-like by pumping gases into the atmosphere to create warmer temperatures and a water cycle that mimics that of our home world. Scientists, however, do not agree on whether terraforming is physically possible. Well, of course it is. It's just a matter of scale. It's my opinion. But Mars clearly used to have a warmer climate, clearly used to have running water and a thicker atmosphere. So if you are going to entertain the idea of giga-scale technology and engineering, then yes, even if there aren't the resources on Mars to create an atmosphere, you could capture comets and crash them into the planet and release the water and other elements and such. There are ways to do it. It's just very large. So yes, it is possible. But is it realistic? That's the issue there. I think Total Recall has the right idea. Michael Mayer, the lead scientist for NASA's Mars exploration program, previously said to CNN, referencing the 1990s movie in which an ancient extraterrestrial artifact is used to create breathable air on Mars. You'd need to use some alien technology, Mayer said. Gorman said that she believes ecological environments on other worlds are worth protecting as they are, even if no life forms exist there. Well, there's no ecology if there's no life forms, so there's nothing there to protect. You could argue if there are subsurface bacteria on Mars, that perhaps terraforming is a terrible idea because you're damaging their abilities to survive. I would argue that you could take those life forms and perhaps genetically engineer them to be more sturdy on the surface, and you'd actually be giving a bootstrap to life on Mars if you did that, which would be pretty cool, in my opinion. The surface of a planet or moon can preserve evidence of everything that happened. We can reconstruct the history of the solar system from what we see on the surface, Gorman said. No planetary chauvinism. Bezos, who founded Blue Origin in 2000, does not believe humans need to pursue a settlement on another planet at all, even referring to such ideas as planetary chauvinism. His view aligns with ideas put forth by Jared O'Neill, the late physicist, he's always late, he's never on time, and Princeton University professor who posited that humans should aspire to live in gargantuan space stations that orbit close to home and spin to provide simulated gravity. O'Neill's ideas were the subject of the 2021 documentary High Frontier. I've read about these many times. I would imagine it would make more sense for us to get an asteroid and hollow it out and spin it instead of constructing something like this. It to me seems very fragile, but what do I know? Let's keep reading. Referred to as O'Neill colonies, these structures would be miles wide and each hold up to 1 million people, said Bezos in 2019, during his most detailed presentation about his space ambitions to date. The Blue Origin founder was a student at Princeton in the 1980s when O'Neill taught there. Bezos has also said that future space colonies must be supported by resources such as frozen water that can be harvested from the moon. And Blue Origin is developing a lunar lander called Blue Moon that could aid such resource extraction. He's expressed his preference for this approach over attempting Mars travel, noting in 2019 that the moon is 3 days away and you don't have constraints on launch that you have with Mars, which is best accessed only every 2 years when the planet better aligns with Earth during a transfer window. You can go to the moon just about any time you want, Bezos noted. Also, an interesting thing, I read a book called A Case for Mars by, I think, Eric Zubrin, who mentioned that it's more cost effective to send missions from Mars to the moon than it is to send them from Earth to the moon. So even though you can get to the moon easier, there are more materials on Mars, and if you wanted to really maximize industry on the moon, it would be cheaper to do so launching stuff from Mars. It sounds ridiculous, it's so much further away, but the gravity is that much lower that actually getting stuff into orbit is super cheap in comparison. Metzger and Gorman said they favor Bezos' vision of our spacefaring future over Musk's. It's wise for space-based civilizations to remain near Earth, they explained, because it would provide an easy pathway to resupply the settlements in their early days. And sticking close to home may pay untold dividends for inhabitants' mental health, Gorman said. But if Musk is successful in establishing a Mars settlement, that would likely make it far easier to one day realize O'Neill colonies as well. A rising tide will float all boats, Metzger said. Neither Blue Origin nor SpaceX responded to email inquiries from CNN for their story. Regardless of their differences, both Musk and Bezos' visions are underpinned by a similar thesis. Humans will soon live and work in space, and the cosmos will one day become the main stage for the economy. Divergent timelines. The billionaires, however, made clear they're operating on vastly different timescales. Bezos has admitted that the technology required to build and deploy an O'Neill colony does not yet exist and has no intention of personally overseeing its construction. How are we going to build O'Neill colonies? Nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody in his audience knows. That's for future generations to figure out, he said in 2019. In the meantime, Blue Origin is focused largely on developing precursor technologies that are cost-effective and could help spur innovation, but they don't necessarily accomplish new things. Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket, for example, is the most technologically advanced offering the company has debuted, and it's mostly designed to compete with SpaceX's Falcon rockets by hauling satellites and other cargo to Earth's orbit at a fraction of the price of older technologies. Musk, on the other hand, operates with a far greater sense of urgency. SpaceX is currently battling the laws of physics as it attempts to hash out the design for Starship, the largest rocket ship ever constructed. So far, the nearly 400-foot tall vehicle has launched on 10 suborbital test flights with varying degrees of success. Pieces of Starship have failed or exploded in flight during 6 of those missions, but Musk is hoping Starship will be ready to enable the initial setup of a Martian colony within the next 5 years. Not sure when this article was written, perhaps it's a little bit dated. Musk has since mentioned that he's interested in getting to the moon more than Mars at the moment. During a speech in May, Musk mapped out a basic plan that begins with launching several cargo-carrying spacecraft to Mars late next year. Humans would follow just 2 years later in 2028, and convoys of hundreds of spacecraft would arrive in the years after, delivering about 1 million tons of infrastructure. However, the technological hurdles SpaceX must surmount to bring Starship to fruition are immense, noted Garrett Reisman, a former NASA astronaut and SpaceX consultant who is a professor of astronautical engineering at the University of Southern California. They might just be butting up against some very intractable engineering problems, Reisman said. I think it could end up never working, or it could end up revolutionizing our entire future of activities in space. Musk has long said Starship's sheer size and power could make brand new types of missions possible, including carrying groups of humans to Mars and deploying massive new space telescopes. The US government is proving to be a valuable ally to billionaires with extraterrestrial ambitions. Faced with its own lofty goals and budget constraints, NASA has been increasingly encouraged to partner with private sector companies like Bezos's Blue Origin and Musk's SpaceX, particularly as hawkish lawmakers in DC have made clear that they view space exploration as a national priority amid a race with China for dominance in the field. The fact that today Musk and Bezos are each pouring billions of private sector dollars into creating new space technologies has introduced a new dynamic. Whereas NASA used to be the primary bankroller and goal setter for such efforts, billionaire-led companies are now paying an equal, if not greater, hand in developing new technologies. Nowhere is that more evident than in NASA's Artemis program, an effort to return astronauts to the moon for the first time since the Apollo program ended in '72. While NASA spent more than $40 billion developing its own spacecraft and rocket for a crewed moon-bound flight, the agency is turning to the private sector to help with almost every other aspect of the mission. Blue Origin and SpaceX, for example, have both received multi-billion-dollar contracts to develop lunar landers or vehicles that will ferry astronauts from their NASA-built spacecraft to the moon's surface. For SpaceX, the lander in development is Starship, a stunning proposition considering that a fully operational Starship will theoretically be powerful enough to accomplish a crewed lunar landing mission all on its own. However, NASA intends to have Starship work alongside the space agency's own SIS rocket and Orion spacecraft, at least initially. NASA awarded Starship a $3 billion contract to conduct the first crewed Artemis landing, slated for as soon as mid-2027. I think it's 2028 now. The detail highlights how NASA has been shaping its own programs around what the private sector has to offer, rather than the other way around. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Metzger said, if SpaceX's rocket that is purpose-built for Mars also helps NASA achieve its goals of beating China to the moon, NASA should get whatever synergy they can from that. But there's no denying that this emerging dynamic gives billionaires and their space companies unprecedented power that could play out in exciting and perhaps dangerous ways. If the visions put forward by Bezos and Musk are realized, they are likely to be accompanied by economic upheaval unlike anything humanity has previously experienced. It would likely only take 20 to 40 years before industry in space will dwarf the industry on Earth, with the in-space economy doubling every 2 years, Metzger said. That's actually plausible. That means the private sector architects of our future in space stand to make so much money that it could forever tip the balance of power on and off Earth, Metzger warns. Then all power is held by those who own the capital, Metzger said, referring to a possible future in which the economy does not require skilled laborers. Those with the financial means could instead be able to leverage robotics and artificial intelligence to scale up their wealth indefinitely, and the precursors of that reality may already be in motion, Metzger noted. Companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX can use the fortunes of their billionaire founders to make technological leaps for which there never may be a large field of competitors. Well, the fact that there's Blue Origin and SpaceX doing similar things is a good thing. I'd hope there are other contenders that could enter and contribute to that competitive market. That's why, according to Metzger, policy leaders should be thinking about how to prevent dramatic wealth aggregation. In his interview with CNN, Metzger said those measures could include the government stepping in to dilute space corporations' equity or creating some sort of universal basic income. He said the Hawking Center at the University of Central Florida, of which Metzger is the director, is also currently exploring ways to ensure that more people across the world can reap the financial benefits of such proposed futures in space. If you have a few people who have 1 billion times more wealth than everyone else combined, then they're going to be able to control politicians one way or another. Well, I think we need to be realistic and recognize that that's already going on. It's just the way the world is. Metzger said about a future in which no steps are taken to mitigate wealth aggregation among space barons. They've got to create a way to democratize ownership and space industry during these next 40 years, or it's too late. Gorman agreed with Metzger's assessment, noting that science fiction writers, including known Musk favorite Isaac Asimov, have been warning for generations about the power disparities that spacefaring civilizations may incubate. A few individuals are already controlling so much of the planet's wealth, Gorman said. I think that is a concern. Plenty of other challenges and ethical quandaries will arise in the meantime. One imminent question is environmental. Musk has said that he hopes SpaceX will one day be launching its spaceship mega rocket as many as 10 to 20 times per day, or once an hour. That would mark an enormous leap in launch activity. Currently, the global rocket industry led by SpaceX has a combined total of about 5 launches per week. Dramatically scaling up the number of space flights would take its toll on Earth's environment. Yeah, I guess, but, from a small amount to a slightly larger small amount, maybe. The issue is depositing heat in the stratosphere during rocket launches, because the heat drives chemical reactions which create a greenhouse gas, Metzger said. About 1,000 metric tons of black carbon are injected into the atmosphere annually by rocket launches, according to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration estimates. The agency's 2022 research found that a 10-fold increase in hydrocarbon fuel launches, which is plausible within the next 2 decades based on recent trends in space traffic growth, would damage the ozone layer and change atmospheric circulation patterns. SpaceX's Falcon and Starship rockets, as well as Blue Origin's New Glenn, use hydrocarbon fuels. Will the governments of the world allow the entire global budget of launching through the atmosphere to be used by one country and by one company, Metzger asked, referring to a theoretical limit that might need to be placed on the number of launches to avoid environmental catastrophe. That's a big unknown. But on the flip side, it is possible that a spacefaring future could bolster Earth's environmental resilience, particularly if Bezos' vision of moving heavy polluting industry into space is realized. Bezos has said he believes that humanity's ever-growing consumption of energy will eventually drain our home planet's finite resources. The good news is that if we move out into the solar system for all our practical purposes, we have unlimited resources, Bezos said in 2019. Another billionaire, former Google chief executive Eric Schmidt, who recently purchased his own rocket company, has been quietly propping up the idea that data centers should be moved off Earth. This is something SpaceX has been doing, I think, with Starlink. There was talk about having data centers in orbit, in space, which is an interesting way of starting the foundations of a Dyson sphere. If the production of these things becomes done through automatic systems, you could have a runaway Dyson sphere thrown up around the solar system. People are planning 10 gigawatt data centers, Schmidt said during a congressional hearing in April, calling energy demands a looming crisis. These things are industrial at a scale that I have never seen in my life. Gorman, however, said she is not swayed by claims of environmental stewardship, pointing to the irony of altering Mars's atmosphere to better suit humans. If you've got any concern for saving or preserving the environment of Earth, why would you think Mars is expendable? She wondered. I think it's kind of disingenuous, she added, noting that she does not believe backup civilizations or mining resources from space would be necessary to solve our Earth-based environmental woes. Well, they're a separate subject, though, aren't they? If we had technologies that would enable people to live in these incredibly tough and challenging environments in space, Gorman said, then we have the technology to more effectively use resources on Earth and make sure we are not completely destroying the environment. It's an assumption there, but maybe that's true. If humanity were to survive Earth's destruction, morphing into a species that survives entirely outside the environment in which it evolved, the challenges would grow increasingly existential. Whether you were in an orbiting laboratory near Earth or within a Martian habitat, any tiny flaw in the life-sustaining infrastructure could spell disaster. Humans could be easily killed by radiation exposure, and the lack of atmospheric pressure on Mars or in orbit would cause a person's blood to boil if they were exposed. And the lack of atmospheric pressure on Mars or in orbit would cause a person's blood to boil if they were exposed. And there is the issue of procreation. Is Mars's gravity enough for human gestation or birth, for child rearing? That is an open problem, Metzger said. Even attempting to research whether a child could survive such conditions presents an ethical quandary. Musk and Bezos have admitted that a future in which humans live safely in permanent extraterrestrial habitats is not easily guaranteed. Earth is the best planet and it is not close, Bezos said in 2019, quoting the late NASA astronaut Jim Lovell by saying that space exploration makes one realize that you go to heaven when you're born, not when you die. Musk has also admitted that living on Mars would be exceedingly dangerous, especially in the early days of colonization. It's not for the faint of heart. Good chances you'll die, and it's going to be tough going. And it better be pretty glorious if it works out. But Musk also suggests that the act of pursuing a spacefaring future, despite the perils, could serve as a sort of balm for existential dread. Life cannot just be about solving one tragic problem after another, Musk said during a SpaceX broadcast of a Starship test flight launch attempted on August 25th. There must also be reason to get up and want to be excited about the future. And a future where we are a spacefaring civilization is infinitely more exciting than one where we are not. Exactly. We have to strive for something. SpaceX's efforts to develop a Mars rocket are inspiring a community of superfans and a cottage industry of tourism around the company's launch and development facilities in South Texas. Among those die-hard fans is Anthony Gomez, a managing partner at Rocket Ranch, a riverside campground along the Rio Grande, with a facility for viewing launches that's so close to Starship's pad that attendees must sign safety waivers. Nearly 100 people from various parts of the world and walks of life gather at Rocket Ranch for every Starship test flight, Gomez noted. Sometimes the guests who are most disinterested, dragged along to a launch viewing by a loved one, are the most affected by watching a starflight lift off, he said. They're the ones that are crying because they finally understand, Gomez said. If you don't feel anything when you see a starship fly, maybe you're dead inside. For Gomez, the pursuit of a future in which we live in space is not a political issue, and it's larger than one billionaire or a single bold idea. It's the aggregated hope of a society, he said, adding that he's inspired by the rank and file engineers at SpaceX working to solve such incredibly complex problems. It's just the insatiable human curiosity about what is beyond this threshold that we cannot pass. When asked whether he would join an early convoy to Mars despite the grave risks, Gomez replied, "Of course. Some people get to die on Mars trying to pave a path for the rest of humanity," Gomez said. "I think that is noble." Gorman said she does not discourage that motivation. "I think it is helpful and contributes to our well-being to think beyond ourselves, to think of an exciting human future," Gorman said. But Gorman also cautioned that even if the bold ideas put forth by Musk and Bezos are not realized fully, with bustling metropolises constructed among the stars, humanity will eventually need to look back toward home. People like Musk and Bezos, they want to keep going to space endlessly, Gorman said. But it's not possible. At some point, we will reach those limits of where human bodies and human spacecraft can go. We'll have to turn our gaze, she added, back to Earth. Why are we turning gaze back to Earth? Are there no gays in space? I think the limits are very high, and I think in order to truly settle space. It's going to change us as a species. A lot of these issues about gestation of babies in space and low gravity and high radiation, whatever, will end up being solved with tweaks in our genetics, whether you like it or not. That shiz is coming. I find it interesting, the idea of planet chauvinism. There's a lot of resources on Mars. It's a very good destination to go to. The moon has some resources. It's not as wealthy as Mars, but it is strategically near. I don't have answers to questions, obviously. We'll only get those answers by being there. But I think Mars is a much more resilient base for civilization than the moon or any of these orbital habitats. Even though they look amazing, they also look very fragile. I've read all sorts of stories about hollowing out asteroids and spinning them to create gravity and filling them with air and life and whatnot. And they seem a lot more viable than depictions like this, which are entirely constructed, seem extremely thin in comparison to the rest of potential micrometeorites and whatever. I mean, could this not just be shredded by, one small asteroid moving at a ridiculous speed, puncturing that and sucking all the air out, and there you go, 1 million people dead? No, maybe not. Maybe you'd have to have a lot of surveillance and super intelligent AI and lasers and whatnot and other stuff to track objects that might be coming near it and zap them or push them out of the way or whatever. But perhaps this is similar to examples of how Victorians viewed the future, where they are taking their limited understanding of technology and expanding upon it in imagining things that in the future or in the present now are ridiculous, like giant multi-pedaled velocipedes instead of the internal combustion engine, or humongous balloons that'll float you to the moon, and odd things that could technically be realistic but aren't actually feasible or cost effective. So this idea probably not going to happen. First off, I think going to Mars, the moon, is a much better plan. Or perhaps going to an asteroid or comet if there's enough resources there. I think once we start down that path of pushing industries into space, seeing as we're using private industry to push this next space race, once it becomes viable, it's going to bankroll itself and become very, very quick, I imagine. I look forward to seeing what Bezos and Musk do. And I know we're going back to the moon, and I think they're planning to land in 2028. Let's hope we get some industry set up on the moon, perhaps with Tesla's robots setting stuff up. That's it for now. Thank you for joining me wherever you are. Make sure you hit that like button, pretty please. The only thing I have left to say is Pigwig out.
Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oink, oink, wee, squeal, snort, snort, oinkity, squee. Oink, 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 squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Snort, snuffle, oink, squee, squeal, wee, snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, wee, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, wee, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squee, squee, wee, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 wee, 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 oh. Squeal, squeal. Snort, snuffle, oink, re, squeal, re, snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, 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 snuffle, re, squee, snort, oink, squeal, oink, oink, oinkity, squee, squee, re, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 re,